My parents chose my sister's wedding over mine, so I walked away from it all and married at my $6 million villa in Tuscany. It sounds dramatic, but let me take you back to the moment everything changed. I had everything planned. My dream wedding was set. My fiancé and I were ready to begin our life together. But then my sister, always the golden child, announced her engagement, and suddenly my special day became an afterthought. At first, I tried to be happy for her, but when my own parents started planning her wedding as if mine didn't exist, I couldn't take it anymore. So I did something no one saw coming, something that shook my entire family to the core. But what happened next? It's something no one could have predicted, and the fallout left us all changed forever. Stay with me because you won't believe what I did. Quick question. Have you ever felt completely ignored by those you love the most? Drop a comment if you've ever been overlooked in favor of someone else. I want to know what you would do in my shoes. Now, let's dive in. I'm Samantha Williams, but everyone calls me Sam. At 27, I've built my life from the ground up. I'm no trust fund baby. My success is all mine. I'm the CEO of my own real estate agency in Miami, closing deals most people only dream about. I spent years working my way to the top, staying focused, not letting anything distract me from my goals. But the thing about family is, no matter how successful you are, you're always the person they remember you were. Growing up, I was always the one who had to prove myself. My little sister, Olivia, on the other hand, could do no wrong. She was beautiful, sweet, and everything my parents had hoped for in a daughter. While I was out there hustling, Olivia was winning beauty pageants, hosting charity galas, and marrying into wealth. My parents were proud of her, of course, but I wasn't resentful at first. I loved her, and in my own way, I wanted to protect her. But Olivia didn't need protection. She had everything handed to her. She'd always gotten the attention, always had the spotlight. And then, when she got engaged to Dylan Montgomery, a tech mogul from a well-known family, that spotlight intensified. She was the one everyone talked about. I thought I'd get a moment to shine, just once. My own wedding. It was supposed to be the one time I'd have the attention, my moment to be the star. I had been planning it for months. My fiancé, Mark Valenti, and I had already chosen everything. The venue, the caterers, the dress. We were ready for the wedding of a lifetime. But suddenly, Olivia's engagement overshadowed everything. I remember the day she called to announce it. My parents immediately got to work organizing her wedding. My wedding? It was an afterthought. I'll never forget sitting at dinner one night. Olivia sitting across from me gushing about her plans for her wedding. My mom was going on and on about how perfect it was going to be. I sat there listening, completely invisible. It was as though I wasn't even in the room. I tried to speak up. I tried to tell them how I felt, but they brushed me off. They said, "Olivia needs this. She needs more time. You've always been independent, Sam." And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be about me again. But I never imagined the lengths I'd go in order to take back control of my life. The tipping point? It came when they canceled my wedding meeting to plan more for Olivia's. I could see it in their eyes. I wasn't the priority. Not anymore. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But something deep inside me started to change. And I had no idea how much further I would go before I took back what was mine. I'm going to pause here for a second. Tell me this. Have you ever felt like you were left out by the people you love the most? Let me know in the comments what that felt like for you and how you handled it. But hold tight. What happened next will blow your mind.
Mark and I had been together for 5 years. We met when I was just starting my agency. He was a rising architect, charming, ambitious, and always just a little bit too perfect. At least, that's how it seemed at first. He was my support system, my partner in everything. When I signed my first major real estate deal, he was the one who celebrated with me. When I bought my first luxury property, he was there to help with the design and vision. I thought we were building a future together, not just professionally, but personally too. We had this vision of our wedding, a massive celebration, a destination event to match our lives. Tuscany had always been a dream of mine. There's something magical about it, the vineyards, the history, the romance. Mark agreed, and we started planning everything. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. But there were signs. Little things. At first, I shrugged them off. He was busy, just like me. But as my wedding day approached, I began to notice that Mark wasn't quite as invested as I was. The meetings with wedding planners? He'd miss them. The venue tours? He'd show up late or cancel last minute. When I asked him why, he'd make excuses. "Work's crazy," he'd say. "I'll get to it later." I kept telling myself he was just stressed out. After all, he was running his own business too. But the more he pulled away, the more I started to feel something was off. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was everything. At my birthday party, he barely acknowledged me. When I had a tough week with a client, he didn't seem to care. My victories no longer excited him. It was as if the closer we got to the wedding, the more distant he became. And then Olivia's engagement announcement hit. In the middle of all the chaos of planning for her wedding, I realized that Mark wasn't the same person he had been when we first met. I was still in love with him, but I couldn't ignore the cracks anymore. There was a moment that made it all hit me like a ton of bricks. One night, just after Olivia had announced her wedding date, Mark and I were sitting at home in our living room watching a movie. I was lost in thought, but I could tell Mark wasn't paying attention. He was checking his phone every few minutes. I asked him, "Are you okay?" He looked up startled. "Yeah, of course, just checking on something." But then I saw it. He was texting someone, a number I didn't recognize. My heart sank, but I said nothing. I couldn't. Not yet. The next few days were a blur, but the feeling that something wasn't right only grew stronger. My focus was on the wedding, but my mind was on Mark. He'd pull away, vanish for hours at a time, sometimes claiming to be working late, but I knew better. And I told myself that when the wedding was over, when the stress of Olivia's wedding finally calmed down, I'd confront him. What I didn't know was that he would make the first move. It happened one night when I was out with friends, celebrating a recent deal I'd closed. I came home a little later than usual. Mark was in the living room, sitting in front of his computer. The glow from the screen lit up his face. He didn't notice me. That's when I saw it. A message on his computer screen from a woman named Sophia, saying, "Can't wait for this weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing you." I froze. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my heart racing. That was the moment I knew. Something was horribly wrong. But what could I do? Mark had already made his choice, and I was too late. I wasn't just losing my wedding. I was losing him. I could have confronted him right then and there, but instead I stayed silent, my stomach in knots. I didn't want to face the truth yet. I needed to be sure. So I made a decision. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I needed to know everything. And when the results came in, they shattered me. He was having an affair with Sophia, the woman whose name I'd seen on his screen. And she wasn't just some fling. She was someone he'd been seeing for months. I never saw it coming. Not from him. Not from the person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. But I wasn't about to let this define me. I had a wedding to plan. A wedding where I was no longer the bride. Do you think I should have confronted him sooner? Or was I right to keep my distance and figure things out on my own? Let me know in the comments, because what happened next is something I could have never predicted. But the real twist is still coming. Trust me, you won't believe what I did next.
I'd spent days, no weeks, in this suffocating silence. I was watching Mark slip farther away, even as the wedding loomed over us like an inevitable storm. I didn't know who I was anymore. The woman I had been, confident, strong, and successful, felt like a distant memory. All of a sudden, I was unsure of everything. My relationship, my family, even my own decisions. But as I walked around in this fog of confusion, something deep inside me was stirring. A part of me was waking up, pushing me to do something. Mark's excuses, his distance, they were no longer enough to explain away his behavior. Every time I confronted him about his late nights or the missing hours, he'd get defensive. "It's just work," he'd say. "You're being paranoid." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the more I watched, the more I felt the walls closing in around me. There were times when I'd be in a meeting with a client and I'd get a text from Mark. Just a simple, "I love you, babe," that felt hollow, disconnected. I'd reply with a smile, but I knew. I knew it wasn't real anymore. I could feel the distance between us growing. I tried to mask it. I focused on the wedding, threw myself into the planning, hoping that if I kept busy enough, I could somehow will everything back to normal. But no amount of distraction could block out the hollow silence between us. Then there was Olivia. Her engagement was everything to her. It became everything to everyone in my family. I could hear my parents, my mother especially, gushing over Olivia's wedding plans every time I saw them. They were pulling out all the stops for her. There was no room for my wedding, no room for me. It was like I didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter that I was the one with the successful career, the one who had earned every inch of the life I'd built. But as the days passed, I realized something about my parents' sudden obsession with Olivia's wedding. It wasn't just a wedding. It was their way of controlling the narrative. They needed her wedding to be bigger, better. Everything I had ever worked for had to be overshadowed by her. The more they pushed Olivia's wedding, the more I felt myself becoming invisible, like I was fading into the background. They didn't want me to have my moment. They wanted their picture-perfect family, and I wasn't it. I wasn't the perfect daughter. I wasn't the one who could do no wrong. The more I realized that, the more my stomach twisted in knots, and that's when I hit my breaking point. I still hadn't confronted Mark about the affair, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Part of me still hoped deep down that there was some kind of misunderstanding, some explanation that would make sense of all of this. But another part of me, the part that had always kept her head high, the part that had worked so hard to get to where I was, knew I couldn't keep lying to myself. And then the bombshell dropped.
One night, while I was out at a charity event with a few business associates, I ran into an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Isabel, and she worked as a journalist. She told me something that made my blood run cold. "Did you hear about Mark? There's a rumor about him and some woman. A few of my colleagues have been talking. It's pretty bad." I froze. My heart raced. I had to know more. But instead of asking Isabel outright, I took a moment to breathe. I needed to keep my composure. I needed to plan. So I did what I always do when I need answers. I called in a private investigator. Again. They followed Mark for a week. I didn't want to know the details, but I had to. The investigator's report came in, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Mark hadn't just been cheating on me with Sophia. He had been seeing her for months, and not only that, he had plans to leave me for her. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The pain was unbearable, but there was no more room for denial. It was all out in the open now. That's when I knew I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't just move on without taking control, but I wasn't going to do it the easy way. I wasn't going to be a victim. I had one thing left, one thing I could still claim as mine, and I was going to take it. I looked at my phone and pulled up a photo of the $6 million villa in Tuscany that I had always dreamed of for my wedding. It was stunning, luxurious, everything my family would never give me. I wasn't going to have a wedding in Miami. I wasn't going to let Olivia and my parents dictate my life any longer. I would make my own happiness. But how far was I willing to go? What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted Mark? Or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments, but hold on tight. What happens next will blow your mind. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. Stay with me.
The next morning, I sat in the kitchen of my apartment, the sunlight filtering in through the windows, but all I could see was the phone in my hand. The screen seemed to burn through me as I stared at the photo of the villa in Tuscany, my escape, my sanctuary. I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to stay here, in this place where everything was tainted. I wasn't going to let Mark or my parents or Olivia define my future. But before I could book the villa, before I can make any concrete plans, I needed one thing: closure. I couldn't move forward without facing Mark. I had to hear it from his mouth. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. So, I called him. "Mark," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "We need to talk." He didn't respond at first. I could hear the hesitation in his voice when he finally said, "Sam, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. No," I cut him off. "We're talking now." There was a long pause, and then he sighed, "Fine. What do you want to hear, Sam? You know what's been happening. I'm not happy in this relationship. I'm not in love with you anymore. You deserve better." I felt the words like a punch to the gut. I had been prepared for it, but hearing him say it out loud was different. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the utter dismissal of everything I'd worked for, everything I had given him. But I didn't let the tears fall, not yet. I was done crying. Instead, I leaned in, my voice quiet but firm. "You've been seeing someone else, haven't you?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then he spoke, the words coming out in a rush. "Yes, I've been seeing Sophia. I didn't want to hurt you, Sam, but I didn't let him finish. I was done hearing excuses. I had seen the signs, and now the truth was laid bare. I didn't need his pity or his apologies. I needed to reclaim my life." "Don't say another word, Mark," I said, hanging up the phone. The finality of it was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I stood there for a moment, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me. Rage at Mark, at my parents, at everyone who had tried to control me. But I wasn't going to let that anger consume me. Not this time. I was going to take control of the narrative. I was going to take control of my own happiness. And it was time to show Mark that I didn't need him. I spent the rest of the day on the phone with the event planner in Tuscany, finalizing the details of my wedding, my dream wedding, the one I had always wanted. As I booked the venue, I felt a rush of empowerment. I was making my own choices. I wasn't bound by the expectations of my family or the betrayals of my past. This was my day, my moment. But as I hung up the phone, I got a text from my mom. "I hope you're not doing anything drastic, Sam. This is just a phase. You don't want to throw everything away. We're family." Family. The word echoed in my mind as I stared at the screen. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal from Mark or the empty promises from my parents. I had given them everything. I had built my life on my own terms, but to them, I was still the disappointment, the one who didn't fit into their perfect family picture. But I wasn't going to play that role anymore. I was done being their afterthought. I was done being anyone's afterthought. I called the private investigator one last time. I needed to make sure there were no loose ends before I left Miami for good. I couldn't let Mark think he could just walk away from everything without facing the consequences. I needed to know everything. And when the investigator got back to me, he confirmed my worst fears. Mark had planned on marrying Sophia. He was leaving me for her, but he wasn't going to do it until after the wedding to avoid the scandal. I couldn't let him get away with that. And so I made my plan. A plan that would change everything. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about taking back control. How far would you go to get revenge on someone who betrayed you? Would you take the same steps I did? Let me know in the comments, because what happens next is only the beginning. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days in a haze, the world moving around me while I remained frozen in place. The wedding preparations in Tuscany continued, each detail falling into place as if on autopilot. But inside, I felt like I was suffocating. There was no joy in this victory, no relief in taking back control. All I could feel was emptiness, a hollow pit where my love for Mark had once lived. I thought about my parents. I thought about Olivia, how they had all brushed me aside so easily. I had spent my entire life trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, and I had done everything they wanted, only to be left with nothing. The silence that followed Mark's confession felt deafening. I couldn't bring myself to speak to anyone, not even my closest friends. I had pushed them all away, even as I had built this life on my own. My phone became a tool of avoidance, my apartment a prison. I spent my nights replaying every moment in my head. Mark's lies, my parents' indifference, Olivia's complete lack of awareness of the hurt she had caused. I couldn't be around them anymore. I couldn't be around anyone who reminded me of that life, the life I thought I had, the life I had tried to hold on to for so long. For a while, I just disappeared. I didn't talk to anyone, not even Olivia, despite all the messages she sent asking if I was okay. She didn't get it. No one did. They all thought I'd bounce back from this, that I'd return to my perfect little life. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back to being that woman. The days bled into each other, a blur of phone calls with the wedding planner, my parents' desperate attempts to reach me, and the cold, empty space I had created around myself. I hadn't cried in days, not out of strength, but out of numbness. It was like my heart had shut down completely, refusing to feel anything at all. But in the stillness of that silence, something else began to stir inside me, a slow, steady realization. I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to let Mark win, or my parents, or anyone who thought they could control my life. I needed to rebuild, not just my life, but myself. I had always been the person who kept moving forward, the one who never looked back. But now, in this silence, I had to face the truth that I couldn't move forward until I truly let go of everything that had held me back. It wasn't going to be easy. There were still moments when I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own thoughts. I still wanted to scream, to break something. I still felt the pang of loss, the sting of betrayal. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't a bright, blinding hope. It wasn't the kind of hope that would make everything better in an instant. It was quiet, almost imperceptible. But it was there. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to get through this, and I wasn't going to do it alone. I reached out to a few close friends, the ones who had always been there for me, even when I hadn't noticed. They listened. They didn't try to fix me. They didn't tell me it would be okay. They just listened. And that was all I needed. I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time since Mark's betrayal, I felt a small glimmer of something that I hadn't felt in a long time. Self-worth. The days of silence gave me something I hadn't expected. Clarity. I began to see the entire picture. The years I'd spent living for others, trying to meet their expectations while ignoring my own desires. It was as if a fog had lifted, and for the first time in ages, I could finally see what I wanted. Mark had betrayed me in the most painful way possible, but he wasn't the only one. My parents had done the same thing, shoving me aside for their own agenda, prioritizing Olivia's perfect image over my own worth. I had been their backup plan, the one who was supposed to be self-sufficient, who wouldn't ask for attention or recognition, but they couldn't ignore me forever. I wasn't just angry anymore.
I wasn't crying over what I'd lost. I was strategizing. There was power in taking back control. I had spent years trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. But now I was going to be the perfect version of myself. I picked up the phone one night, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed the number for my wedding planner in Tuscany. "Make it happen," I said, my voice steady. "I'm booking the villa. No looking back." I didn't care about the money anymore. It didn't matter how extravagant it was. This was my wedding, and no one was going to take it from me. No one was going to make me feel small again. But this wasn't just about having a beautiful wedding in Tuscany. It was about sending a message to Mark, to my family, to everyone who had ever thought they could control my life. I was going to show them that I could live without them. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. What I needed was my own strength. And I was going to find it. The next step in my plan, it wasn't just about running away to Italy and having a romantic escape. It was about forcing everyone to face the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to let Mark or my parents get away with treating me like a pawn in their game. I didn't need to confront Mark directly. He had already shown me his true colors. But I was going to make sure he knew exactly what he lost. I reached out to one of Mark's closest business associates, a mutual friend who had always praised Mark's business acumen. He owed me a favor. I knew he would help me gather the dirt I needed. I made a list of all the things Mark had done over the years, every betrayal, every lie, every time he had manipulated my success to benefit himself. I wasn't going to take the high road. I wasn't going to pretend like I wasn't hurt. But I was going to make him pay. I wasn't going to let him simply walk away and marry Sophia, pretending like everything was fine. He was going to feel the weight of what he had done. He was going to regret ever thinking I was just some disposable part of his life. The more I planned, the more it became clear this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative. I wasn't going to be the woman Mark left behind. I was going to be the woman he would never forget. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you go for revenge? Or would you take a different route? Tell me in the comments below, because what happens next will change everything. The pieces were falling into place. I was ready for the next chapter. But the question was he ready for what I was about to do?
Hold on a second. What would you do in my shoes? Would you walk away quietly, or would you take control of the situation and make them pay for what they did to you? Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. I really want to hear how you would handle betrayal and heartbreak. Now, let's get back to it, because things are about to get a lot more intense. What I did next? Well, you're not going to believe it. Stay with me, because the real twist is just around the corner.
It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a statement, a declaration that I would never again let anyone walk all over me. Tuscany was beautiful, but my mind wasn't just on the gorgeous views or the lavish celebration I was about to have. It was on them, Mark, my parents, Olivia. It was about making sure they realized what they had lost and what they would never get back. I landed in Tuscany a few days before the wedding, my heart pounding with excitement. There was something in the air here, something that felt like freedom. The villa was everything I dreamed of and more. It was breathtaking, set against the backdrop of vineyards and rolling hills, the perfect symbol of the life I was building for myself, the life I would create without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. I spent the next few days preparing for my day. The planners, the caterers, the designers, all of them were in awe of my vision. I didn't care about the extravagance, though. The wedding wasn't the real reason I was here.
It was about showing the people who had hurt me just how far I was willing to go to reclaim control of my life. But the night before the wedding, as I sat on the terrace with a glass of wine in my hand, I received a text from my mother. It was short, sharp. "Sam, we've made a mistake. Olivia's wedding is falling apart. We need you to come back and fix it." I read those words again. They didn't shock me. They were exactly what I had expected. My parents weren't asking because they cared about me. They were asking because they needed me. And at that moment, I realized something. I had become the person they always turned to when things went wrong. The one they expected to save them, to clean up their mess. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't their backup. I wasn't going to be their afterthought.
So, I responded. Simple. Direct. No. I let the silence linger. There was no more space for them in my life. No more guilt, no more pretending. I wasn't going to leave Tuscany, the place where I had started to rebuild myself, to fix something that wasn't my problem. Mark had made his choice, my parents had made theirs, and now I was making mine. But there was more to it. This wasn't just about telling my family no. It wasn't just about them learning the hard way. It was about Mark understanding that I was stronger than he had ever given me credit for. I had one final card to play. I knew how to hit him where it hurt the most, his career. I had dug into his business dealings, worked with that mutual acquaintance of ours, and found enough evidence of his shady practices to put him in a position where he could lose everything, the business he had built on my back, the image he had crafted of himself as the golden boy. That night, I emailed everything to the one person I knew could get it out to the press. The story would break the next day, right around the time of my wedding. It would show the world exactly who Mark was, a man who had used and discarded me, who had lied and cheated his way through life. And I watched. As the sun began to set over Tuscany, knowing that tomorrow would be a day of reckoning for everyone who had ever wronged me. It wasn't about ruining their lives. It was about making them understand the cost of betrayal, making them see that I wasn't the woman they could walk all over anymore. Mark thought he could just leave me, thinking I'd be nothing without him. My family thought they could push me aside for the perfect daughter. But what they didn't realize was that in the end, I was the one who would have the last word. And when that story broke the next morning, everything changed. What would you have done in my position? Would you have gone all the way with revenge, or would you have walked away and left it behind? Let me know in the comments. The final chapter is coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned, because this story isn't over yet.
The morning of my wedding, I woke up to a flurry of notifications. The email I had sent the night before had hit the press like a bomb. Mark's business dealings were exposed. Every lie, every shady transaction, the truth about his affair with Sophia, all of it was splashed across news sites and social media. It wasn't just his career that was on the line. His reputation was in tatters. People who had once hailed him as a successful entrepreneur now saw him for what he truly was, a liar and a manipulator. For a moment, I felt no joy. The revenge hadn't brought me the satisfaction I expected. It was quieter than I imagined. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. I stood on the terrace of the villa, looking out at the vineyard, the cool Tuscan breeze brushing my face. This was my day, my new beginning. I wasn't tied to the past anymore. I didn't need Mark. I didn't need my parents' approval. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. I was enough. When the ceremony started, I walked down the aisle alone, without anyone to walk me down. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt powerful. The wedding was everything I wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had built this life for myself, and it was more than I ever expected. Mark didn't show up, of course. I didn't expect him to. He was too busy trying to salvage whatever was left of his shattered reputation, and my parents? They tried to reach me, of course, but I never answered their calls. At the reception, I received an unexpected message. Olivia, my sister, sent me a text. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of this. I stared at the message for a while. The apology was unexpected, but it didn't change anything. Olivia wasn't the person who had hurt me. It was the people who had raised me. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my own life, and I was finally at peace with who I was. The family I had once tried to please, they had no place in my life anymore. It was time to let go. Mark's betrayal had hurt. My parents' rejection had stung. But they had no control over me anymore. I was finally free. Have you ever found the courage to let go of people who were holding you back? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Move on or go back? Let me know in the comments below. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming your life, your happiness, and your peace. And I hope it's inspired you to take the first step towards your own transformation. But remember, this is just the beginning. The next chapter in my life is already starting, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Looking back, I realized the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the heartbreak or the moments of loneliness. It was the realization that I had let other people define who I was for so long. I spent years trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I chased the approval of my parents, tried to prove my worth to Mark, and lived my life according to what others expected. But in the end, none of that mattered. The real lesson came when I let go, when I stopped living for them and started living for myself, when I embraced my own worth, when I stopped doubting my ability to thrive without their validation. That was when everything started to change. Revenge wasn't the goal. It was never about hurting Mark or making my parents pay for their mistakes. It was about finding the strength to walk away, to claim my own future. And that's something no one can take from you. I've learned that we all have the power to redefine ourselves, to let go of toxic relationships, to stop waiting for permission to be happy. And that's what I did. Have you ever had to walk away from something that wasn't serving you, even though it was hard? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments below. Let's talk about how we can take back control of our lives, no matter what we've been through. The past is behind me now. The future is mine to shape, and I'm finally ready for whatever comes next.
I hope this story has given you something to think about, something to reflect on in your own life. It's not just about betrayal or revenge. It's about finding the courage to step into your own power, to let go of the people and situations that hold you back, and to create a future on your own terms. If you've ever felt like you were living for someone else, this is your reminder that you deserve to live for you. Don't let anyone dictate your happiness, your success, or your worth. You are more than enough, just as you are. And remember, this is just one story. The journey of reclaiming your life doesn't end here. It's ongoing. And I know you have the strength to overcome anything life throws at you. If you want to hear more about my journey, about how I'm moving forward and building a life I truly love, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's keep this conversation going. Leave a comment and share your own thoughts. I want to hear from you. What's your story? How have you taken back control of your life? Because the truth is, we're all in this together. And there's more to come. Click that subscribe button now and join me on this journey.